telling people that, oh, you're really good at this, but you need to work on this, which you're not good at, is a waste of time. Mm-hmm. His argument was find out what people are good at and put them in a position to do the good things.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm excellent.
Thank you so much for being on Owning Your Legacy podcast with me. And it's really great to see you in person.
I know. We haven't seen each other in quite some time.
It's been a while.
Thanks for having me. This is so much fun.
You were always on my list of, I'm going to get John McIntyre. This is going to be really fun.
Good.
So before we dive into our topic,
okay,
I would love to hear your story. So tell us a little bit about your story.
My story. Well, I was born in Chicago.
Yes.
Because here we are in Chicago.
Yes.
How relevant is that? Big family, very technical, a lot of engineers, scientists, and things like that. I gravitated towards science and went to college and studied chemistry and then went on to graduate school to study biochemistry. Interestingly, I never, throughout my career and even through my education, was never like, there's this one thing I want to do. I was very much interested in a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how my career has evolved.
I would call you curious.
Yeah.
In a good way, you know?
Yeah. And I enjoy learning new things. I also enjoy connecting things. So, as a biochemist, I started with another Chicago company, GD Searle, out of Muskogee. Mm-hmm. And which was owned by Monsanto. And I started in drug discovery. And so biochemistry was great for that. But then, Monsanto owned NutraSweet. And I thought that was interesting. So I worked at NutraSweet. They had an ag business and I worked in the ag business. So my career's evolved where I've worked across a whole series of different industries. Mm-hmm. But about 15 years ago, I really got into foods and beverages and food ingredients. And once I started working in food,
nobody leaves food.
Nobody leaves. Even if you bring other technology to food, and I do a lot of that, I still find that food and agriculture are the areas I like working in best. And so over my career, I have worked in a bunch of different industries, but all kind of focused. And the fun part of my story has been the ability to connect different areas of science to different areas of business and to see the connection. And if there's anything I see happening in the world of innovation these days and new technology, is that it all overlaps.
Yeah.
And technologies that were developed for one industry are now being applied to other industries. And we see that all the time, especially pharmaceutical to flavors and foods and so on and so forth. So that's kind of been my journey. And
I think that's a perfect segue because I really wanted to dive into innovation. So we've talked about this a little bit. And I think, interestingly, with what's going on in supply chain and just the economy right now, what's your thoughts on innovation with large companies versus small companies? So where do you think innovation's going and where is it not going?
Well, I think the challenge with the term innovation is, well, what do you mean?
True.
Right?
Define innovation.
Yeah, it's an overused word. And often there's a group that will default to innovation being some big transformative new thing. And innovation...
Sometimes it's the simple thing. Almost always, right?
Yeah, and it could be in any aspect of your business. If doing your supply chain differently eliminates 5 steps in your, it makes things more efficient, that's an innovation.
Yes.
But we often think either new technology or new products or maybe new services for the most part. And
I'd say this podcast is an innovation.
Very much so, because it brings people to talk about topics in a very interesting and open way.
And collaborate. And
I agree. And I think big companies, they innovate in what I would call structural elements. They don't create many new products these days.
That's what I liked our discussion about that. I thought that was intriguing because when I first met you and you were at Pepsi and you had just moved over to the snack side.
Yep.
And you were frustrated of the lack of innovation. And I was like, yay, because I really want to help you with that. And then recently when we talked, you said, no, I was wrong. And you're
Well, I would say I was wrong for them
right.
in the regard that they want new innovation in products, but they can't incubate something new. So a
Right.
big company like a PepsiCo or a Coca-Cola, Kraft Heinz,
Right.
it's very difficult for them to take a new concept and build a brand and a new product around it, because the scale of their business and the way they go to market doesn't incubate small things with patience and accepting, oh, the first year sales were $200,000 when they're used to having $100 million brands.
And the speed, I think that's important. The speed to market is so hard for them compared to the startups. I mean, we see that it's, 12 to 18 months to launch something at a big CPG versus these startups do it in 6 months.
Well, and the
sometimes.
scary part is, working, I've been the ingredient person like you, selling to the big people, and the guy at the big CPG working with them is, if somebody in the innovation or marketing team or the brand management team changes, well, everything everybody else was doing, I don't really like. And they start from scratch.
That is so true. I was so sad when you left. Because you have to, and I feel like that in the industry in general, there's people that move, but lots of people retiring now that it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I miss, yeah.
Rebuild new.
You got to keep consistently building those relationships.
How much more work are you doing with more startup food and
That's a
beverage
darn
companies?
good question. I would say it's 80-20. I'm guessing off
More
the top of my
small
head.
companies
More
now?
small, plant-based for us is
Yeah, big.
booming. But also we're seeing way more collaboration. So I think that's been fun. I love that. Where the startups are open to having more people at the table.
Okay.
So they'll have like the starch company, the flavor company, and really collaborating together.
Oh, it's like it's a consortium of suppliers creating.
Exactly. So we have one coming up, I think, in a couple weeks, that we're uniting a couple of those people around the table and doing like thought leadership. And it's online. It's going to be, but the amount of attraction to this was huge. Lots of people signed up already, like 300 people. So it's big.
Yeah, I would think so. And in fact, some of the bigger ingredient players have been trying to create their own incubators and bring a bunch of the ingredient companies together to work with the startups. But my experience is the big companies stumble all over each other, fighting for what the contract, and then no work gets done.
Exactly.
And I think so.
They get too bureaucratic, right? I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things.
Intellectual property and who owns this.
Oh, I've had some discussions with some big CPGs on that where it was a big, opportunity, big project, and they're like, we need your formula. And I said, yeah, hell to the no to that.
Yeah.
There's no way I can give you my IP.
Yeah,
We
for
can
sure.
definitely tell you allergens and everything under the sun, but there's no way we can do that. And thank God that the flavor industry as a whole, under FEMA, flavor and extract
Yeah.
manufacturers, we hold hands on that.
Yep.
Because if one flavor company falls and gives that away, then we all will fall,
Yep. Yeah.
So IP is interesting.
It's interesting from a standpoint of the tech provider. I fought hard at Pepsi to loosen up our need to hold on to IP. And my logic was the following. The real power of a company like a PepsiCo or Kraft Heinz is in its brands.
Yes.
You've built so much value in the brand. Think of the billions of dollars of marketing and positioning and
Right.
awareness. And so we were talking to an invention fund, a group that had a network of 2,500 inventors all around the world, and we would bring them a challenge like, how do we create a nutrition bar that doesn't use sugar to bind it all together, right?
Right.
Because if ever you've eaten a nutrition bar, right?
Yeah.
It's like the kind bar, it's all sticky on the outside. Why?
Right.
That's
And then
the
it's
sugar
got
syrup.
the high carb content, which all of us are trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So it's
So one of the things was, how do we get rid of the sugar and still get it to stick together? Now, I'm pretty sure we never solved the problem, but during about 6 months of negotiating, but even before the project started, I had to get up in a meeting and say, look, you guys want to own this and that and everything. Pepsi wants to own this. And I'm trying to talk to our lawyers and our other leaders in the company. I said, 100% ownership of nothing, because we couldn't invent this ourselves, is nothing.
Yes.
So we could get 50% of something really big. And by the way, if it's for sports nutrition or beverage, who are we losing it to? I mean,
Right.
the guys that are developing this want it to be in Gatorade. They want it to be in Frito products.
Right.
So don't let this kind of big company mentality about ownership get in the way
It's almost a
of
power
bringing in new
struggle, right?
ideas.
It's like a power struggle. That's kind of how I felt when I was put in that position. And it's like, you can't then buy me, you know? It's like,
It feels to me like in innovation, when you're working with partners, there is always a business structure that respects each company's need. And you know this because you
It's
guys...
mutually beneficial relationships. You don't want anyone to do business with you and then you're putting them out of business.
Yeah.
What's the point of that?
Well, and, when I was CEO of Motif and we were, launching our first ingredient, and one of our customers said, well, we'd like an exclusive. And I'm like, well, you want me to scale the business. You want me to drive costs down. If I only supply for you, I can never do that. And we all know as ingredient suppliers, that's just not feasible. Now,
Right.
I could give you 3-month head start. So the structure around innovation is really critical too. How you structure the partnerships to give somebody, you want to incentivize them to take the risk to try something new, but you can't give away the opportunity by allowing them to own it all. And that's
Right.
the interesting kind of friction between tech supplier and brand owner, right?
Yeah, the yin and the yang. I would love to hear the contrast between going from Pepsi, big CPG, to Motif, a startup, and talk a little about that. I bet that was an interesting...
Well, I had to jump in between. I went to an ag startup called Indigo, but yeah, I was employee 1 at Motif.
Wow.
So I hired...
That's a startup, I think.
Oh, that's yeah. To be fair, I didn't start with nothing because we spun out of Ginkgo Bioworks with a contract to use their technology and $90 million.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah, that wasn't bad.
Right. Not bad.
not
Some to
bad.
work with there.
I turned around and raised another 30, and then we raised another 226. So we
Nice.
raised a lot of money because, as you know, because you just mentioned it earlier, the whole plant-based or alternative protein markets, whether it's dairy or meat, were very, very hot. They're a little cooled off now, but they're not going away.
I agree.
They're not going away. Figuring out who to hire first and how to get work done and not having all that infrastructure in place. It was fun, but there were times when it was extremely frustrating. But, I really liked it. I mean, I liked being able to, as you run your company, mold it the way you want, right? And when you start from employee 1, you really have the chance to build it the way you want. And I enjoyed that. However, I did miss, my career is half in big companies, half in startups, right? It feels like I do a big company and then I do a startup and then I go to another big company and then I do a startup. I think there is a part of me that enjoys, from a big company perspective, the leadership requirements, and you're big enough to know this, to really move a big group of people into a new way or a new, keep them motivated, push the new agenda. There's a lot of skill and work that goes into that kind of leadership. At a startup company, it's a few people. You're not really working on a lot of that. You have a tendency to be a little bit more focused on the tactical things and the technical things, and you can lose track of the people issues because there's just a few of you and you're all stressed out trying to get a lot of work done with a few people. And I miss the people so at the beginning of the startup, I miss the dynamic of a larger organization.
Right. And more like strategic, and we're all heading towards this goal and this mission, versus we're in survival and probably feeling a little bit, more day to day of, we just got to get her done.
Big companies have short-term objectives and long-term objectives, but you always have, pretty much a revenue stream that exists, and there can be pressure because it's not growing or you're losing share and all that, but you're not going to run out of money.
Exactly.
But in a startup company, I mean, the CEO lives from funding event to funding event. In fact, you raise a certain amount of money and then you say, okay, what am I going to get done with that? And about halfway to that goal, you got to start thinking about, okay, I've got to raise the next round of money. Did I achieve enough with the first round of money? And then can I be clear about what I want to do with the second round of money? And is it creating enough value that some investor wants to continue to put money in? That is a different way of thinking than when you're running a day-to-day operations with revenue coming in and you're thinking more about customers, you're thinking about new product launches, you're thinking about share. A high percentage of mindset in a small company is the next funding round.
Right.
And that's the reality of it. It gets you sharply focused on value, right? Like, you can sit in a room with the three leaders in the company and go, what do we have to get done in the next 3 months that somebody's going to give us another $20 million?
Wow.
So you have to be able to say, okay, this creates value. Let's get all our team to make sure we deliver on that objective. In a big company, you got hundreds of things that you're doing, right?
Right. And then you have to answer to, Wall Street or shareholders. I really am grateful almost every day that I'm privately held because I wouldn't do well in either of those scenarios. I like to be able to have the long vision and takes, calculated risks and investments. And that sounds really stressful.
Well, in a startup, you don't have to report to Wall Street as much, but your board is the investors.
Right.
So you're dealing with people that own the company. They're not sitting on the board because they're a smart person that can help you. They're sitting on the board because they told the bigger fund that this was worth spending money on. Damn it, they're going to make sure that it turns out right.
Right.
So, I think it was Bob Dylan says, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
Exactly.
So in a startup company, you're serving somebody, whether it's a board or Wall Street. And the worst part is that's not, as a leader, and I know you, and I know what kind of a leader you are. You really think about what you want to do is serve your team.
Yes.
As a leader, you don't want to be worried about
and your customers, right? I mean, that's probably watching your team
serve the
customer, and then seeing a product on the shelf that they did together. That's the true joy. So let's talk a little bit about culture, and let's talk about the culture of innovation and around the people. And when you said you were the first one at Motif, how did you build that culture and that team? What were you looking for? What did that look like?
Early on, you're trying to figure out how to create a technology that has runway to get to a product. What I did was I tried to create, one, we were all recognizing that we had to do science that would lead to products. This wasn't an academic exercise. But at the same time, we needed people that could think about new technology. Mm-hmm. So balancing what I would call people that know how to apply technology to create innovation versus people that really are smart enough to understand a new science or new technology that leads to potential innovation. And you got to create enough of both. At first, you're putting a little more effort into discovering something.
Right.
Because and then you're putting more effort into people that can take a discovery and move it in. And you're always reshuffling that. At the different stages of a company in a startup, you're judged by different things. Early on, are you generating data that makes everybody think the discoveries are going to lead to products? Well, you get to do that for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then...
But then you got to deliver.
Then you got to have product. Mm-hmm. And even then, even if the product looks good, you got to sell it. And it's not always there's a lot of great products that
never see the light of day.
Never see the light of day. But we all know as leaders that you have areas that are your strengths.
Totally.
Good leaders are willing to recognize their shortcomings. I know you're big on strength finders and utilizing
this
that.
New one, John, I was just thinking as you were talking too that we got to tell you more about it. I'm not good at it, but Brenda's really good at it. So it's called 6 Geniuses, and it comes from the traction stuff that we've been loving at EOS. So Gene Lencioni came up with the 6 geniuses, and it was kind of an aha. So you take this test, and there's these 6 things, and you love this. Like your green is the 2, and then there's your yellow where you can live there a little bit, and then there's red
Where you don't exist.
Whew. Like if you have a day that you're in the red, even for 3 hours or 4 hours, it feels like a 12-hour day. You can have a 12-hour day when you're in your green and you're like excited and energized. So no surprise, mine is wander. So I like coming up with ideas. I don't know how to execute to save my soul, but I can come up with the idea. And just like you were saying, you have to create a team around your strengths and your weaknesses. And there's inventors, and they can take it from 100,000 feet and invent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like they show it like a swirl, just like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a machine. You need all of them,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to know what you really hate.
So you're more like your father than you knew.
Yeah, a little bit. And it's been hugely helpful because you always kind of wonder what's getting in my way, what's my blind spot, so to speak.
But that speaks to how you build your team too. And then it's more complex than that, though, as we know.
Right.
You try to identify people that complement your strength or complement your weaknesses, and you build a team where that's.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just that. It's also culture, personality, work styles. You don't want them to all be the same, but at the same time, they have to work together. So it sounds easy to say, well, I'm not good at finance, so obviously I need a CFO that can help me, blah, blah, blah. It's not, but it's more than that. Because if it was that simple, everybody would figure it out, and they don't.
Right. And these words are like discernment. They're because I wouldn't say that's my strength. That's probably why I've struggled hiring well sometimes, because I just love everybody. And I don't have enough discernment. But it's just good to know that,
Okay, so that being said, how do you create an interview process for you and your team so that the things you don't see, other people can see and say, Laurette, I noticed this person.
Right. I think that comes around having the safety within your team to say, Laurette, you might want to think about that. And I do feel like we have that psychological safety to really, it's not a yes culture. Thank God. None of us want the yes culture. We don't.
I remember early in my career, we were doing a lot of hiring when I worked at NutraSweet, and we had a candidate that all the scientists love. Mm-hmm. And we asked one of the admins that set up everything for this person's visit and trip, and she had the courage to say, this person treated me very poorly. And we said, that's good to know. We're not going to hire this person. So I think you have to have a strategy on different people when you're interviewing. All come in with a different angle that they're going to look at. You're going to look at resilience, teamwork.
Right.
Because otherwise, everybody asks the same 5 questions. Give me a time when.
Right.
What's your strength? Because people are the most important thing in any business, as you know.
Absolutely.
And if you want them to fit your innovation culture, your work culture, the extra effort to hire correctly. And because a bad hire can really set you back.
Yeah, as we know. And to make those decisions quickly when it is. I've gotten way better at that. I mean, it would take me years in the past, and that has now become a strength. And to do it with grace and,
and respect to everybody. And by the way, usually the person, if they're not fitting, they're going to be better off where they go next.
They're not happy. That's so very true.
It's hard to get there. Especially because a lot of people, it's a hard thing to lose a job.
Right.
And to be told you're not working there. And one, the person doesn't take it well. If they're well liked in the company, it creates ripples. And
yes.
But to your point, and I think it's important for an innovation culture and just a good work culture. Like you said, you got to the point where you were able to be honest. And I pushed that back to innovation because, I've had the pet project that I loved, let's do this. And hey, how come not a lot of work is happening on that project I love? And all I'd find out is nobody else thinks it's a good project, John, and we're not working on it. Okay, so I'd rather have you come to me and say, here's the reasons why.
Right.
They were right to not work on it because it was a dumb project, because we all have our skunk work dumb idea.
Right.
But it would have been more efficient if they would have just said, John, trust me, this is a bad idea. We're not going to work on this. So
talk a bit about when you do have a shining star in your culture, about investments that you make in them. How do you develop them? What's your thoughts around that?
When you find somebody that you find extremely talented, and for example, the new CEO of Motif was a person that I hired 3 times. I was his mentor for years.
3 different companies?
I hired him to DuPont Soleil.
Okay.
I hired him to Pepsi Beverage, and then he was in Pepsi. He was in Asia, and I brought him back out of Asia to Frito. And then he was at Kraft Heinz, and I hired him away from Kraft Heinz to come to Motif, and now he's the CEO of Motif.
He must think the world of you to go with you 3 times. That's a huge
and take my job as the new CEO.
Yeah.
He should really be grateful.
He should be. Yeah.
He's a great guy. He's really super smart, and we always knew he was a great talent. And you know, one of the things I think about developing talent, and it's probably universal to even people that aren't the high performance opportunity people, high potential. And I learned this from one of my favorite bosses at PepsiCo. He was the president of all North America when I was there. His name was Al Carey. He's he's more of a sales guy than an operator. Mm-hmm. But he was a servant leader. And one of the other things that he came to believe was telling people that, oh, you're really good at this, but you need to work on this, which you're not good at, is a waste of time. Mm-hmm. His argument was find out what people are good at and put them in a position to do the good things.
Strength finders. Yep. That's
exactly.
Beautiful.
And he would reinforce it in the most beautiful way that he would say to you in like a review. And I love this. I use it a lot. I saw you at your best when, and then give a very specific example, kind of say, do more of that.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm telling you, the minute you heard that, like if Al then said, John, run through that wall, I'd run through that wall.
Right.
Because you just feel like this person took enough time to observe what I was doing and recognize when I was doing my best and when I wasn't.
Feel truly seen.
And
wow.
And that development of talent, I think, is better to say, you're really good at these 3 things. Let's, instead of trying to make you good at a 4th thing, let's try to just put you in a position to always be doing these things.
Do you use that with your children? That would be really profound with kids.
I think by the time I learned that, they were already set in their ways. And at this point, they might say, yeah, Dad, we saw you at your best when you shut up and didn't tell me when I was playing. I don't know.
That's great. So
it's good. It is good. I might try that with my grandkids.
I would love to hear more about servant leadership. I love that topic. And I think, tell us more about his traits and what you really saw in him and what you emulate.
So Al would say, my job is to define the vision and the strategy. I take inputs from a lot, but then I have to own that and build and recruit the right people. And then my job is to get all the distractions, all of the bottlenecks out of the way of you doing your job. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to do your job. I know we need what you do. My job is to run interference so that you can do it the best you can. And if you're not, I need to hold you accountable. But I'm here to make you be successful. Whatever I can do to help you grow and learn and execute what you need to do, that was his job. And he did it all through, I almost never saw negative reinforcement. It was almost all positive. If things were going into the, you know what, he would deal with it. Mm-hmm. But instead, he was much more focused on positive, like we need to find a win here. We need to find a win here. For me, he moved into the beverage side of PepsiCo in 2012. And we had been struggling. Coke was kicking our butts in North America. And Al came and spent a whole day at the R&D labs because we've got a ton of innovation.
Yes.
We need to get out there and promote that innovation. And he grabbed me by the collar, basically, threw me on, this is going to sound really terrible. He threw me on the company plane with him, and we flew around Walmart, Kroger's.
That does not sound terrible. That sounds fantastic.
It sounds arrogant. That's what it sounds like.
No,
it's not bad when you sit in the plane and they do have if it's the bigger plane, they do have somebody that's, Mr. McIntyre, the card says, you like blueberries and strawberries, but not blackberries. Is that correct?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
I hesitate to share
I
that.
remember,
but yes, at one time I had a spoiled life.
You know?
There's a difference between big companies and small companies.
Yeah.
Flying on the company plane and getting the berries that you
Renee,
want.
I was at a FEMA board meeting with Renee, and he had just gotten promoted to, I can't remember what his
Chief Technology
She's
Officer.
the chief of every, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
he
just
was,
talked to him Friday.
did you? He's
Yeah, we're friends. We're close.
Great human.
Yes, he
Really
is.
appreciated getting to know him. But yeah, he was like, yeah, wheels up at blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wheels up? Can I get on that plane with you?
You probably could.
Yeah.
If you
end up in Dallas, but
we used to fly it
Can
here.
you drop me off in Chicago?
We used to fly it here for the
Quaker
Gatorade headquarter and the labs out in Barrington.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago. But I like history. I think history is the best management books because you like my favorite
Leadership.
management. Yes, my favorite are about Lincoln. I give it to leaders when I tell them, especially if you have a young leader that's going to be leading people that are more senior than them. Doris Kearns Goodwin's book on Lincoln, Team of Rivals, is about how Lincoln built his cabinet, how almost all of them at first didn't like him, thought he was an idiot, all thought they should be president, but he was smart enough to put that team together. And through the power of just his personality and his brilliance, they all eventually coalesced. And I think that's a great message for young leaders because, earlier in my career, some of the jobs I got, when I was in my 40s, I'd inherit a team of 5 or 6 leaders.
Yes.
And most of them thought they were going to get the job that I got. They were more experienced in the industry than I was. And they knew more than me. And I needed them to teach me. And that dynamic is critical. How do you be the boss, but at the same time recognize how much you need them? And how do you make that relationship build so that both sides are getting something out of it? And
probably starts with respect. Mutual respect.
Giving a lot of respect and being patient and not being like, I'm the boss, do this.
Right. And listening. I think listening is huge. Truly listening.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course you may.
Your dynamic as CEO, owner, president, is it more intimidating? Like if you work for a company, even at Motif, I was the CEO, but the company had lots of owners and everything else. Is the dynamic challenging that people more intimidated, afraid?
That's a great question. It kind of falls into what you were just saying. The people that I grew up with at Edlong, and there's a handful of them still there, I would say not at all intimidated. We kind of went through the fire together.
Yeah.
I'd say I work hard at trying to meet the new and the young at picnics and just be a human. But they don't, and especially with the pandemic, they don't have a chance to just meet me in the hall as much as...
Well, you're back now, right?
I'm down here, so I'm not in the office every day like I used to be. I need to work on that. I need to get there more often because it's important. We were just talking earlier about, going to a picnic and there's a lot of people I have never met more than on Zoom. And, so I think
how
that's...
many people in the company now?
Oh, we're somewhere around 100 to 200-ish.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. And you know me, I like to know like their kids. And,
Yeah,
like,
I know.
You know, I like to really get to
That
know them.
takes
And
a
that-
lot of time.
It does. I'd say my dad was a master at that. That was something
Was the
that
company
it
smaller
was,
then, though?
Yes, it was smaller. But we probably have about almost 25 to 28% new out of our population. And
New meaning 12 months, 18 months?
I think that's in the last year or so, but I could be wrong. And it's not regrettable turnover, you know. I think it's okay. It was meant to be, and we needed to have some of that and some new roles, just totally new roles. So that has been different. But yeah, I try to not use my title. One of my least favorite things I ever hear at Edlong is because Laurette said so. That gets me kind of violent. Like, I didn't hire you because Laurette said so. I want your brain. I want your opinion. I want, you know, your knowledge and experience. So,
You know, it's interesting about that. I was at an event once, and there was a speaker who was a neurologist and did both neuropsychology as well as the kind of science of the brain. And he was talking about corporate culture. And you do a great job at this. I can always see this with the team meetings I've had with you when I was your customer. The worst thing that can happen in a group dynamic is in people feeling a lower status. And companies that have hierarchy and status, like beyond just reporting, but like, you
Right.
know, there's the in group and this group and silly things like, you know, this person always sits here
Right.
and that kind of stuff. There's data that shows that if you feel like you're lower status in a room, your IQ will drop 20 to 30 points.
wow.
So you are not functioning at the higher level that you could. And let's face it, we hire people to be working at their highest level
Absolutely.
of performance. And so when you put them in a situation where they feel like they're lesser, they immediately behave like they're lesser.
Right.
And outside of their even control.
I think to me that I love that and thank you. I appreciate that. And at my core, and maybe my calling, is this culture of authentic belonging, where I want my people to feel like they can be themselves and belong.
Yeah.
And when you feel safe like that, that's when you can bring your best self, just like you're
Yeah.
saying.
Although it's funny, I talked to a head of HR, which now is head of people. And she said, you know, people went through this period where it was like, bring your whole self to work. In reality, we don't want you to bring your whole self to work.
Right.
Leave some of that stuff at home.
Yeah. The baggage. Yeah.
Your personal issues.
Yeah.
And I don't want to know if you and that person over there are hooking up.
Yeah, we don't need to know that.
We don't need to know that.
I think it kind of goes back to growing up in a big family, and I know you get that so
Yeah.
well because we've talked about it. But there's something to that. Of it wasn't really highly promoted to be like hugely visible in our family. You know, it was there was just a lot of us, and
7, right?
7 in ours.
Me
Yeah,
too.
yeah. And where you fall, you're the baby too, aren't you?
No. Third.
Third.
Middle.
So I am the last, the caboose. And I was significantly, obviously a mistake. I was 5 years later, Catholic family, and yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Although my mother's crazy. So I remember someone coming up to my mother and saying, my youngest, he must have been the mistake. No. Number 6 was the mistake. And once I had number 6, I didn't want him to not have a playmate, so I had 7.
Well, she's honest.
Yeah,
I
it's
could say
crazy.
that about at least 2 out of my 5, and they know it, but I love them to death, so it's meant to be. And I feel, yeah. But yeah, there's, we do bring some of that family stuff to work for sure, especially when you're in a family business, which would be a totally different topic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess before we get to the very last question, tell me what you see, and I loved what you were talking about just as we were getting ready to get on, but what you see coming down the pike in terms of innovation.
At a very high macro level, and I see this in a lot of industries, we've been a chemical-driven society, and we're now becoming a biology-driven society.
Fermentation.
Fermentation, just microbes. I mean,
Yes.
the whole bioeconomy. Just yesterday on Morning Joe, they were interviewing Mark Warner, senator from Virginia, and they were talking about the competition with China and what things do we have to win. And essentially information technology, future energy, and synthetic biology are the three areas that
Those all
are
make
critical.
sense.
And I got lucky through my boss at PepsiCo, Mahmood Khan. He was a director at the Council on Competitiveness, which is this think tank in Washington, and I got connected with them. And we talk a lot about what the new economy needs to be. And the council is evolving itself from being, I'm going to be really aggressive here, a bunch of old white dudes and old companies like DuPont and Dow and university presidents. And I remember at the first meeting, and I had left Pepsi. I was at Motif at the time. I said, where is all the startup people? Where are all the innovators? Where are all the, that's where, I mean, let's face it, the companies with the greatest value in the world today, most of them didn't exist 30 years ago.
Right. And I think that brings diversity of thought.
Bingo. I'm with
You
you.
need that. You need it. You need all of that.
So I see, if I look at innovation, I see technologies of AI, the whole synthetic biology, and an expanded version of that to think about things like the whole microbes and the use of microbes to replace chemistry, and it'll be big in food too. It's already big in food. In fact, food's been in fermentation and microbes longer than any other industry. We've been brewing beer, making whiskey, yogurts, whatever else. We've been cheese, all products where microbes play a big role. And now we understand the biology better. We're harnessing that biology.
I heard
The other thing is
Purdue,
sustainability is going to drive a lot of people's product offerings and innovation that people can point to the sustainability factor. It's going to be critical. So getting rid of all the packaging to packaging that's compostable or recyclable, I think that's going to be a big change for most industries. And it won't just be food. It'll be
we learned
all
something
industries.
the other day of an angel investing type woman, and so it gets a lot of like pitches and Shark Tank kind of thing. And she was talking about somebody coming up with a metal, water bottles, but like at stadiums, and they can be cleaned. Like I'm almost picturing like a vending machine, but it's metal, and then you stick your dirty one back in there. And it sounds small, but she's like, when you look at it on the grand scale of all stadiums and all the venues like that, it can make a significant difference. And so that's your sustainability point for sure.
The thing about sustainability, and I'm not saying she's not right, but sometimes the solution is less sustainable than, because the argument is like, so when recycled paper was a big thing, it turns out recycled paper took way more
water, right?
Water and energy than trees. And
It's
in
so
general,
true.
if you treat trees like crops, like pines that grow fast and you just grow and harvest, turns out it was better for the environment to do that than it is
It
to
always
recycle something.
annoys me when you try to do the right thing and then you learn that you're like, oh,
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Sometimes
I think here we are sitting in the Midwest, and if the Big Ten network is on, you see the advertising for all the ethanol.
Yeah.
It's always questionable whether fueling our cars with ethanol is really, taking corn and making it into ethanol. I mean, there've been a million arguments on that, but my point is people want to do the right thing. But I think that's a trend. So mega trends are going to be things like sustainability. Another big trend, which you guys will profit from, is developing nations consuming more protein. And one thing that people who haven't been in the food industry don't learn until they spend a very short time in food and then realize it doesn't matter on all the other benefits. If it doesn't taste good, people don't eat it. It's
totally
taste
true.
good. So that
You
means
have
you're
all the best intentions, but if it doesn't taste good, you're not going to buy it again.
Yeah. And that's where your industry and your company does so well, because you're the one that puts food's not just for nutrition, it's for pleasure. And we know that.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I mean, we all need a little escape from time to time. I love the little Dove chocolates we were talking about. And you open them and they have like a little saying. It's like a moment.
oh
We
yeah,
all
yeah.
need that. I was going back to your fermentation, which I totally agree with. Purdue, where I went,
Yeah.
they have a fermentation just started. I just learned this, a fermentation degree. Like this is
Really?
the first year of it.
Wow.
So in 4 years or so, we're going to have some scientists to hire from that. I think that'll be pretty cool. I think they're the only university with that. I could be wrong, but maybe
I
there's.
think people would learn about it in microbiology and or biotech departments, but productivity of microbes and fermentation is still stuck in old.
Yes.
So there needs to be new technology. So a degree is good. It educates people, but more research dollars. One of the things at Motif, we were making proteins through fermentation, and we could use a order of magnitude improvement in that process to make the cost go down. Let's face
Right.
it, a new technology that's expensive is very challenging
Then you
to bring
can't
to market.
scale, right? Yeah.
Can't scale, and the scaling is worse too because how much capital you have to put in hundreds of thousands of liters of reactors.
Yes.
Versus if you could develop some much more efficient processes, it now becomes more affordable and it opens up more innovation. I think that
So we need those engineers at Purdue to be working with the fermentation
for
scientists to come up with the
and
equipment
the microbiologists.
engineering.
It'll be the
Yeah.
microbes, the genetics, the engineering, and all of that stuff that will come together. And I'm like I was saying at the very beginning, I've been lucky in my career to have developed myself more in a horizontal fashion than in a vertical fashion. And so there are companies that I'm talking to today, I'm advising, that are in microbes, and they're asking the question, how many different industries does our technology potentially apply to? Which one should we work in? So you've got materials and industrial enzymes, you've got food, beverage, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, all of them need those kinds of expertise. And so that's what I'm saying is that's a bioeconomy. And you saw that
Right.
Biden just had a big initiative about a month ago where he's committed more money through NSF and NIH into really driving the synthetic biology and bioeconomy. So I think that's the future of some of these
I do
things.
too. So we're going to close on the question I always close on. So it's probably not a surprise to you. So tell me about the legacy you want to leave behind.
I realize what I thought I wanted my legacy to be has evolved and changed a lot over time.
That's kind of cool.
To be a little self-deprecating during the years at a big fancy job at a place like PepsiCo, some of your values get a little out of whack. At least mine did. Like my life revolved around being a big executive versus enjoying the work and the people and doing something more important versus the status and the growth. And as I've stepped away from Motif recently, CEO, every round, we were the highest round in food tech. When we raised 120, it was the biggest A round. When we raised 226, it was the biggest B round. We thought we were getting ready to raise the biggest C round, then the world crashed.
Right.
Those things seemed more important. And now that I've stepped away, I realize I find more pleasure in connecting people and connecting ideas and bringing things together. My heroes in life have changed. So I almost wore it today, but I have a travel shirt. Every time I get on a plane, I wear my Mr. Rogers and it says, "Hello, neighbor" on it. And it reminds me to be humble and kind, especially when you're traveling, because like you can really get,
when you're delayed for 6 hours, and yes.
Last night I got onto the plane to catch a red eye to come here, and there was a kid, I'm not kidding, screaming at the top of his lungs. I was like, I got headphones and I'm looking at my shirt. Be like Mr. Rogers. Be compassionate.
That was a great movie.
Be understanding.
That was a really good movie.
So if my legacy, I think I'd like it to be about somebody who loved connecting science and technology across a lot of industries, but more importantly, connecting people in those contexts.
You are a master at that. I feel like some of particularly the women that you have introduced me to, have turned into some of my greatest friends.
Well, it's a dirty little secret is that I like working with women better than I like working with men. I have a tendency to hire. My mother, who lives here in Chicago, she would say, I see your leadership team has 5 women and 3 men. That's pretty good.
That's
Maybe you should get rid of one more.
Yeah.
Pam, our friend Pam Henderson.
Yes.
I said the reason that I liked working with women better is that, and this is a little ageist.
Yeah.
There was a generation of women who became, who are professionals that are mothers and kids. They don't have time to jerk around.
That's so true.
Men, they got somebody's taking care of all their crap. And guarantee you, I was one of them.
Yes.
All of a sudden I realized they don't BS. They're right to the work. They're not playing games. And most of them, for the most part, aren't playing any politics. We're focused on the job. Whereas guys, they're all pecking order and hanging around and goofing off. And I was like, nah,
It's
better to
so
work with
true.
women.
I remember having my first Garrett, my oldest birth child. I've got older bonus
I know you got a
children.
whole.
I got a crew. I was working in customer service at the time at Ed Long, and my hours were like 7 to 1, and then my husband would work, late. We staggered stuff. I didn't have time to mess around. You are so right. I had that window to get this much done, and I had a wonderful woman who backed me up when I left, and she would, those times we had crazy like walkie-talkie phones. They were so fun. It was Motorola. I loved them. But I agree with you. I feel like, and I agree with the politics comment too. I don't do politics well at all, and there's no time
to say
for
that
it.
it's a binary thing is
Right.
not true because there's a
Right.
spectrum all the way across. Michelle and you and Pam and Gail Vance Seville.
Yes.
And Chris Chaffee. And I could name another half dozen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
it's such
joining
a
me.
pleasure
It
being
was
here.
really enjoyable.
And I remember how much I miss spending time with you.
I know, me too. I'll have to do more.
We will again. I got another project. I got a project for you.
Yay.